When Allied soldiers first pushed into Germany in the final months of World War II, they thought they had seen every kind of horror the war could produce. They had marched through ruined cities, liberated towns, and fought against some of the most hardened units in the German military. But nothing prepared them for what they were about to uncover. Nothing came close. For months they had heard rumours, whispers, a few intercepted reports about labour camps, prisoners, and mass starvation. But in wartime, rumours were endless. Nobody knew what was real. Nobody expected what they were about to walk into. And on a cold April morning in 1945, outside the city of Weimar, the soldiers of the US 6th Armoured Division reached the gates of Buchenwald and stepped into a world that did not feel human. The discovery wasn't planned. The camp wasn't marked on their maps. The front line had moved so quickly that German officials didn't have time to evacuate or destroy everything. Many guards fled as soon as they heard tanks approaching. Others tried to burn documents or destroy equipment before running into the forests. But the camp was enormous, far too big to hide, too big to erase. And as the Americans moved through the trees toward the hilltop compound, the first thing they noticed was the smell. At first, soldiers thought it was burning wood or spoiled food. Some wondered if it came from factories in the area, but as they climbed the hill and approached the barbed wire, the odour grew heavier, thicker, unfamiliar. Veterans who had fought across Europe later said it was the one smell they never forgot, a mixture of smoke, sickness, filth, and something else they couldn't identify until they walked through the gates. The entrance to Buchenwald looked deceptively ordinary. Wooden guard towers, electrified fences, long rows of barracks. From the outside, it resembled a labour camp. But the moment the Americans stepped past the main gate, they realized they were looking at something far beyond any prison or battlefield. It was a place built not only to imprison people, but to break them. The first survivors they saw were standing silently near the gate, barely standing really, more like leaning against each other, bodies thin enough to show bone through skin. Their heads were shaved, their uniforms hung loosely like cloth bags over their frames. Some stared blankly at the soldiers, unsure if the men in front of them were real or a trick. Others didn't react at all. They had seen too many false hopes. One soldier reached out instinctively to help a prisoner, but the man flinched, stepping back in fear. He had lived too long under guards who beat anyone who moved too quickly. Communication was impossible at first. The prisoners spoke dozens of languages, but they didn't need words. Their faces, their bodies, their condition told the soldiers everything. As the Americans continued deeper into the camp, the scale of it began to hit them. Buchenwald wasn't just a collection of huts. It was an entire functioning complex. Workshops, factories, processing buildings, storage rooms, and long rows of barracks meant to hold tens of thousands of people. Some buildings were already looted or burned by fleeing guards. Others still contained paperwork, lists, orders, and personal belongings stripped from prisoners over the years. The barracks were the first place the soldiers entered. Inside, the air was suffocating. The windows were tiny, barely letting in light. The wooden bunks were stacked 3 or 4 levels high, each level built for one person but packed with several. Straw mattresses hadn't been changed in months. The air smelled of disease and damp wood. Some bunks still had people lying in them, too weak to stand. When soldiers tried to help them out, many were terrified. They assumed they were being moved for punishment, not freedom. Some details were small, but they stuck with the soldiers forever. Tin cups chained to walls so prisoners couldn't steal water, shoes made from scraps of cloth, piles of wooden clogs worn completely through, barracks where prisoners had carved tiny marks into the walls to track how many days they had survived. Outside, in open yards, soldiers found improvised workshops where inmates had been forced to make weapons, uniforms, or spare parts for the German war machine. They found evidence that Buchenwald had been used not only as a labour camp, but as a centre for medical experiments, torture, and political imprisonment. Even without describing gruesome detail, The environment itself, the tools, the equipment, the documents, revealed a place designed to extract every ounce of labor from people until they could no longer stand. One soldier described walking into a building that looked like a storage shed. Inside were piles of clothing sorted into categories: shoes in one pile, trousers in another, children's clothing in another. Each pile represented thousands of people who no longer existed. Another soldier remembered seeing shelves full of personal items, watches, rings, glasses, kept like inventory in a warehouse. The soldiers realized they were looking at someone's entire life reduced to a list of objects. Word spread quickly through the ranks. Commanders arrived, followed by doctors, translators, and photographers. The Americans immediately sent radio messages to nearby units. "We have found something unlike anything we have ever seen." Reports were passed up the chain of command. Officers insisted that more witnesses be brought in. They wanted every general, journalist, and politician available to walk through those gates. They knew the world would need evidence, real, undeniable evidence for what had been discovered. Inside Buchenwald, the surviving prisoners began to understand that liberation was real. Slowly, cautiously, they approached the soldiers. Some cried, some laughed in disbelief. Some tried to salute or stand at attention, unsure how to act around these new uniforms. Others remained frozen, unable to comprehend freedom after years inside the camp. The Americans worked through the day to bring food and water, but medical officers warned them to be careful. Many prisoners were so severely starved that eating too quickly could kill them. Soldiers who had never thought twice about sharing their rations had to be stopped. Doctors set up emergency stations to treat infections, dehydration, and disease. The stench of illness was everywhere, but the soldiers pushed through it, determined to help as many people as they could. As officers toured the site, they realized something else. Buchenwald hadn't been hidden in a remote forest. It stood on a hill overlooking ordinary German neighborhoods. Houses were close enough that residents could hear the trains arriving. Some soldiers, furious, forced local civilians to walk through the camp. Many denied knowing anything. Others broke down as soon as they saw what was inside. Whether they truly hadn't known or simply hadn't wanted to know remained one of the most debated questions of the post-war years. That evening, senior American commanders arrived. Shocked by what they saw, they insisted on documenting everything. Photographs were taken from every angle. Records were seized. Survivors were interviewed. The Americans wanted no doubt, no denial, no rewriting of history. The visit by General Eisenhower came soon after. When he stepped inside Buchenwald, he understood immediately that the world would struggle to believe it. He later said he needed to be there personally so that nobody could ever accuse the Allies of exaggeration. He ordered as many reporters as possible to visit the camps. He wanted witnesses. Back in Washington and London, the reaction was immediate. Telegrams describing the camp reached political leaders, and many initially assumed there had been a mistake. The scale sounded impossible. But as photographs arrived and first-hand accounts piled up, disbelief turned into horror. Churchill called the discoveries crimes without parallel. American senators who visited Buchenwald returned speechless. One senator said he felt as if a part of my soul had died walking through the buildings. News organizations tried to describe the events without overwhelming listeners. Radio hosts often paused mid-sentence. Some broke down on air. Newspapers printed as much as they could, but even the printed word struggled to capture the atmosphere. The silence of the survivors, the emptiness of the barracks, the size of the camp. While Buchenwald was the first major concentration camp the Western Allies entered, it was only the beginning. Within days, American troops discovered Dora Mittelbau. Within weeks, they uncovered Flossenburg, Dachau, and dozens of subcamps. Each discovery added new layers to the understanding of the Nazi system. But for many soldiers, Buchenwald remained the moment when everything changed, when the war stopped being a battle of armies and became a battle against something far darker, After the liberation, the Americans gathered evidence for trials. They collected names of guards, commanders, and doctors who had worked in the camp. Survivors gave statements. Documents revealed orders and transport lists showing how people had been brought in from all over Europe. This mountain of evidence became crucial during the Nuremberg trials, where former officers tried to deny responsibility or claim ignorance. But the records from camps like Buchenwald left no room for debate. For the survivors, freedom came with mixed emotions. Some felt overwhelming relief, others were terrified of the future. Many had no homes to return to, no families waiting for them. Entire communities across Europe had been erased. For years after the war, displaced persons camps were filled with former inmates trying to rebuild their lives from nothing. Buchenwald itself became a symbol, not only of suffering, but of the moment the world was forced to confront the truth. It was proof that the Holocaust was not a rumor, not wartime propaganda, but a real system built deliberately and carried out with precision. Over the years, the camp was preserved as a memorial. Survivors returned to speak to students and leaders. Historians studied the documents left behind. And the phrase "never again" became a moral commitment. For the American soldiers who walked through those gates on that April morning, the memory never left them. Many said it was the moment they truly understood what the war had been about. Not territory, not politics, but stopping a system of cruelty that had taken root in the heart of Europe. And it all started with a smell on the wind, a gate on a hill, and a discovery that changed the world forever.